Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive's Employee of the Month, 2 months in a row. Leave a message at the... Hi, Jamie. It's me, Jamie. I just had a new idea for our song about the Name Your Price tool. So when it's like, tell us what you want to pay, hey, 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 and the trombone goes, blah, 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 and you say, we'll help you find coverage options to fit your budget. Then we just all do finger snaps while a choir goes, savings coming at ya, savings coming at ya. Yes? No? Maybe? Anyway, see your practice tonight. I got new lyrics for the rap break.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
I'm riding solo today on the Your Favorite Band podcast, and that's okay because it's a very special episode today, and we wouldn't want Dave to screw it up. This is a bonus episode. We normally put out an episode of this podcast every other Monday, and we just put one out this past Monday with a band called 5 Iron Frenzy. And we've been getting such good reviews on that one. So thank you guys so much for the feedback. You can email us yourfavoritebandpodcast@gmail.com with some thoughts. We really love hearing back from you guys. It helps us in the future with interviews. And so thank you for those kind words about the 5 Iron episode. If you have not heard it yet, we'd love for you to go get it. So go download that immediately after you listen to this. But this is a bonus episode because today is a very special day for my friend Zach and Citizens and Saints. They have a new album that came out today, and we are more than lucky enough to have Zach on the show today, and he's going to be talking about the new album A Mirror Dimly, track by track, and I'm just super excited for you guys to be able to hear samples of these songs and to go out and buy this record because it's so good. Without further ado, Zach, how are you, my friend? Welcome to the podcast.
Doing really well, man. It's super cool to be able to do this. I just
Congrats.
love the idea of... Yeah, thanks, man. Thank you so much. We're excited. We've been working so long on this thing. It feels kind of surreal to finally know that people can hear the whole thing. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little unfair because I've gotten to listen to it for the past couple of weeks, and I've gotten to just really enjoy it. So I'm excited for people to be able to hear it today. Some samples here, an acoustic version for me, but also to go out and buy it and not stream it. I know your thoughts on streaming, Zach.
Well, it's good that you're in the loop on that then.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I still definitely stream music, but...
Well, I do too, actually. I stream... I kind of have decided that I like the idea of like streaming a record a time or two and deciding if I want to buy it, and then using that as sort of like the old like FYE days, you know? You go there and you...
For sure.
You know, we had something like that at Walmart or in the town I grew up in, except they bleeped out all the curse words, so which was pretty funny. I don't know how they did that, but...
Well, that's good on them, I guess.
Sure.
I stream, and then if I like it, I'll buy the vinyl, because I'm cool and hipster like that.
Yes, so. I respect that even more.
Thank you so much. Real quick, before we dive into this album, I do want to give everybody a little bit of history about your band, because this is, album number 3 for you guys?
Yeah, this is our third, yep.
So talk through kind of how you all began and how you got to where you are now, and then we'll dive into this album.
Totally. So we met all at the same church. My family and we moved out to Seattle to be a part of a church called Mars Hill, which is no longer a church. And when we were there, I worked at the church as a worship pastor. And so the band met, and one of the things that we really kind of wanted to do was I grew up in a church that an old Southern Baptist church in Maryland, of all places, and I just didn't appreciate hymns at all until I was older, and it really meant something to me when my grandma, when she was older, and she would talk about these different songs that she'd want sung at her funeral, and I just thought that was pretty interesting to me, that for her, regardless of even what you believe, like the for her, like she learned so much about Jesus through those songs. And so as I got older, I began to really appreciate the hymns a lot more, because I think there's a certain really special tradition that's come through them. And so we started arranging a bunch of songs around those, and then as time went on, we started to write songs for our church to be able to sing. But then you fast forward to Mars Hill no longer being a church, and I had resigned a few months before, and up to that point, we were all five of us in kind of different places. Like, we all left the church at different times, but all over the course of that 6 months. And so as we came out of it...
Had the entire band left Mars Hill before the eventual closing of it?
All of us but one. And one of them, it was a little more complicated just because he'd been a part of the church like twice as long as most of us, and from almost the beginning. And so it was just a little bit different for him.
Yeah, I do want to add, like, this, you're the first person I've talked to that was kind of in the midst of it, and it's easy for me across the country to look online and read all the gossip about Mark and all that stuff. What was it like being in the middle of that? Was it difficult for you to not just get pissed off with the church as a whole because of the fact that, I mean, you got this pastor who is doing whatever he's doing, but then you have people online who are bashing him, and it's just like this weird, like, what is going on type thing. For me, I wonder what it was like for you in the middle of it.
It was very, it was super sad. I mean, it was sad to experience. It was like tearing apart relationships, like friendships. It was just, I mean, it was such a tumultuous thing. I mean, it's kind of like you're on a boat that's about to capsize, and everybody's just freaking out. Nobody really has nobody's like super sober minded, if you will. Everyone's kind of like drunk on fear and anger, and just wanting to know what's going on. And that's the thing too, is like, I actually personally didn't really see it as a big deal, as some people saw it, like with all the stuff going on online. And that's just because Mars Hill was a public forum, you know, like when you're creating hashtags for your sermon series and to tweet out what Mark says or whatever. I mean, there comes a certain point where it can't always be good stuff that's said. I mean, there's going to be criticism. I think some people take that criticism too far and make it personal, but I do think there's a way to talk about that stuff publicly and it be actually helpful. And I think a lot of people were doing that. I think many weren't, but I think a lot of people were. And so, like, coming out of all that, it was kind of, you know, it was really hard. It was like we were in the midst of a funeral for, you know, that didn't end for a long time. And so yeah, man, I mean, it influenced this record, completely influenced this record. I mean, this record would not be what it is if it weren't for everything we went through at Mars Hill. If it even weren't for Mars Hill just completely falling apart, because Mars Hill got to the point where in a city, I mean, dude, I don't know that there's many people that weren't connected to Mars Hill. Like, if you ask somebody that wasn't a part of Mars Hill Church, whether they're Christian or not, what they thought of Mars Hill, no longer being a church in Seattle, I don't think many of them would say, "Oh man, it's just so sad." I think most of them would say it's a good thing now, and that's because Mark was Mars Hill. You know what I mean? Like, that's how the church. Everything was communicated as like Mark is the church. And so naturally, when you see a guy who is doing things that isn't always very admirable and isn't always very in line with, you know, preaching the love of God, sometimes it seemed more of like this wrathful message. Even towards the end, you know, I know he kind of tried to soften, but it was still the same type of, you know, the same sentiment was still there. And so I think what eventually happened is just people were just really like, just kind of like, all right, we can breathe again. And people went off to different churches, and that was really hard. It's been hard for people that were a part of Mars Hill, because the family that you had and friendships just don't exist like the same way that they did before. They're there and you can see each other, but it's not like showing up on Sunday and having like this weekly meeting spot where you're reconnecting. And so I think that's probably been the hardest part for people, is just having to do that. So that's kind of what happened for us. That's why the record actually is the way it is, because only all of us, except for me and another guy in the band, are all a part of different churches now. So it wasn't as important to us to write us an album that was like for church like songs for the church to sing. And so that all was influenced by that stuff that happened at Mars Hill. I mean, there was plenty of really good stuff. I mean, I have plenty that God did through that, but also there's plenty of really terrible stuff too that I wish I hadn't participated in or hadn't helped to perpetuate in certain ways. So,
one thing that I don't want to say thankful for. I'll say it. One thing that I'm thankful for as somebody who works at a church plant and is trying to think well about what it looks like to reach people for Jesus is we have all these mega churches across the country. And I think the one good thing that can come out of this is just a conversation of, is it healthy for a church to be built on the personality of a man besides Jesus? And the answer is clearly no. And I look at churches like Elevation and Stephen Furtick and some other churches like that man, if that guy left, if that guy fell, what would happen to the church? And if the answer is it would collapse, then there's something wrong with the way that you're doing things. So I think the one good thing that came out of that was that conversation, like, are we leading our church, are we leading our people well, to which if the leader, for whatever reason, fell or did something, people would still be in love with Jesus. Like, are they worshiping the man or are they worshiping Jesus? And so I think that's the one good thing that came out of that. It's just that conversation between people who are trying to think, what does it look like to plant churches and reach people?
Totally, man. And I mean, even for my wife and I mean, Mars Hill was the 4th megachurch that she'd been a part of. It was the 3rd for me. And it was all unintentional. I mean, she grew up at a church that just grew really fast and became a really big church. And then I went to Georgia and became a part of a church there in college, just a college group, and eventually worked there. Never thought I'd ever work in ministry. That wasn't anything I ever thought about doing. And then worked at another church in St. Louis, mega church, and then worked at Mars Hill as a mega church. And the biggest thing that for us that was like really like solidified was like, hey, we're just not going to be a part of mega churches anymore. And it's not saying that they're all bad, but I think it is like for us so far, it does seem like there is a lot of, and there's a lot of great people that we've worked with too, don't get me wrong, but I still think a blind spot that many of them have of every place that we've been at is it definitely focuses a little too much on the leader.
One thing that you said towards the end of your last statement was that going into this album, you felt the freedom to write songs that might not be like for Sunday morning, but still are honoring and glorifying to Jesus. And as I was listening to this, the question that popped in my mind was, do you wish that this was the type of music that people could worship to on a Sunday morning rather than the latest Chris Tomlin or whatever? Or are you content with the fact that there's some music that works in the church and there's some music that could work but might not? Are you okay with that tension, or do you wish that worship leaders were a little bit more gutsy in the choices that they make with songs?
I guess both and. On one hand, I do think that music in the church is sometimes a little bit too... and I see this, coming out of even years of working in churches. We finally wound up at another church in Seattle, and one Sunday it just occurred to me, it's like, man, most of the songs that we wrote as citizens like probably wouldn't even work here. And so I think that to me is, trying to write a song that is like across the board, everybody's going to want to sing, I think is overall, not trying to be too critical here, but I think that is a general thing that most of the pop worship community is trying to do. Despite what they would say, I wholeheartedly believe that they're trying to write songs that the entire church can sing. Yes, Chris Tomlin has done that, and different people have done that in some ways, but that's not like an easy thing to accomplish. And so for us, I kind of view like writing songs for the church to sing. If that's the only thing you're going to do, it's kind of like writing pop songs. If like you're trying to build your whole career on like writing the anthem that the church is going to sing, I think it can be really, really exhausting and it can almost like just like make you hate, like have disdain for music writing. That's what kind of happened for me sort of with the last record, because it was my own fault. I was just focusing not so much on we're going to write songs that are going to change the world, but we were just trying to write every single song that the church could sing. And I think what happened was we kind of ripped the heart and soul out of some of those songs by trying to make them so singable and so like PC in certain ways, like saying the thing that we thought people needed to hear rather than the thing that, we just wanted to say. And that wasn't because anybody was influencing us in that. That was just something that I did, and I really regret that. I'll never make music like that again. And so I think with this, yes, it'd be cool if people found this music encouraging. But for me, I think I just want to look at it as like something bigger than that. Like, yes, it could be cool to be sung in the church, but at the same time, I think there is still a great deal of opportunity for music that like this to just be in people's ears throughout the week, or in their stereo or something like that as they go through their week. That kind of, because worship isn't just Sunday, it's like a constant continual flow of what we're pouring out, whether to God or something else. So my hope is that this record would be like a really helpful, like just like friend and companion for people as they go through their life.
Yeah. So talk about kind of the title of the album, why you went with A Mirror Dimly, and kind of when did you begin the process of writing and then the instrumentation and then finally going to the studio, when all that came to be?
Yeah, so the title of the record comes from a passage in 1 Corinthians 13, and really just kind of what really kind of stood out to me in that passage is like this idea, which I was feeling, is that God fully knows us, but right now there's sort of this veil, or there's this inability that we have to see God completely. And so there's still a lot of mystery and a lot of unknown. And that was a pretty like encouraging thing to me, because I was in the midst of feeling a lot of doubt and feeling really confused, and just realizing that whether you believe in God or not, there is a certain camaraderie that we have, there's a lot of, it's not certain, we have it. We have camaraderie. Like we can look around the world and we can see bad things happening and say that's terrible. We can feel that. We can look at something that's really special and beautiful, and we can say, yeah, I mean, that's a pretty magnificent thing, a baby being born, in Seattle, I mean, certain days when it's not cloudy, you see this gorgeous mountain, and it's like nobody in Seattle is like, I wish someone would blow that up. It's blocking my view. And, nobody's saying that, And so I think that there is like certain things that we can, like where I would say our souls are moved to feel like extreme, like something like just this like joy or contentment of like, whoa, this is like really amazing. And then our souls are moved to feel like complete sorrow sometimes, depending on the circumstances. And so that to me, as I was wrestling through all that doubt and stuff it was doubt. It was doubting God, and, like in different ways, of whether it was certain aspects of the Bible, or a friend of mine whose daughter was dying of cancer, and just talking to him a lot and just feeling really broken and burdened for them. I all those things that just kind of hit me like, man, sometimes I feel like in Christianity, we created this language that is so foreign that it's like, how in the world, no wonder it's so hard to have conversations with people about God, because we've just created all these cliches and words and languages. And so that's another part of it, was to like de-Christianese myself, if you will. So it was like the album title didn't really come together for me until probably 3/4 of the way through the record, because as we were going through it, I knew, okay, this is an album about searching for clarity. But then like that passage just kind of, to me, like helped me to finish the rest of the record as far as like lyrical writing, because it kind of made sense to me all of a sudden. It's like, oh yeah, this record is meant to be a journey. It's like the ups and downs of, there's like the first track is like this, big explosion of like glory and worship of God. And then it immediately goes into, I'm lost and I don't even know what to think, because you're such a big God and I feel like I barely understand you. And then it kind of goes on and it goes on this journey, and eventually you get to the end, and it's not really like a resting place. It's just more of like a realization. And that's the thing to me that was really the thing that like helps us sustain and continue through this life is knowing that we're loved by God. And so really that's kind of how it all formed together. And so as we wrote each song, we kind of had those things in mind, like this idea of like there's this mystery of who God is. And also too, I mean, I just feel like in some ways it was like an out-of-body experience, because a concept formed together without me necessarily sitting down and saying like, oh, this is going to be a concept record. But as I started writing a lot of these songs, it just became really apparent that, you know, they're about these three central things, and that's doubt, faith, or really two central things: searching, and then being loved. And so that's kind of what really helped to formulate it. And then as we kind of saw like, whoa, there's a really special like story that's happening here, that's when we really wanted to finish telling that story. We didn't want to just leave it there and be like, oh, that was cool. It started as a happy accident, but it became something very intentional.
Yeah. So for a lot of people, today will be the first day that they're going to hear this album. So we want to walk through track by track, kind of like an audio commentary for the album. So let's start with Crown Him, which is like, man, I've put on the record for the first time, and this song started, and I was like, yes, this is going to be good. Like, the building of it is really good. Like, man, I loved it. It's one of my favorites on the album. So talk about the writing of it.
Wow.
And then kind of, man, like I feel like when it gets to that chorus and it's really big and stuff, like that is truly beautiful. So talk about kind of the thought process heading into this. What did you think, yeah, this is going to be the first track on the album, or did it just kind of feel right at the end of it?
You know, when I was writing the song, I had two different songs kind of going at the same time, and I think this is one of the only songs on the record, at least as far back as I can remember, that happened this way, where it was like two songs that kind of came together. Not necessarily like two full songs that came together, just two song ideas that I made into one. And it was just really interesting because pretty much every song on the record, I would bring it to the band, and we would basically, it would wind up becoming musically something a little bit different than what I had envisioned. But this song in particular is really close to how I had envisioned it, and I think a lot of that's because it was the first song, or it was the first or second song that we really, really worked on, as far as I've got lyrics written, a chorus, an ending, like let's like see this through and let's try the structure. And so we did that. And I think, you know, what was really pretty special to me is like it wound up coming out even more than that. Like Brian had, you know, we had the idea of putting strings on it, and Brian, who produced the record but also plays keys in the band, he is just this, you know, he's a very accomplished violinist. And so he, you know, can, you know, basically he can arrange and compose, you know, those string parts, you know, which is pretty amazing. Like, it's not just, you know, some hack who's just singing out a part and telling a couple strings players to play it. Like, he actually, you know, could compose that. And then also we gathered together a group of, you know, from a local orchestra to play on the record. And that was one of those songs, Crown Him. And so to us, it was like this, you know, you're kind of going through the song. It's like building the tension of, you know, almost like we're there. We're actually present. We're like watching Jesus come to earth. We're watching the crucifixion. We're watching the resurrection. And it's like the whole earth is shaking. Like, that's kind of what I imagine. It's like, you know, it's like shaking and building like a rocket, you know, is about to take off. And then it kind of takes off when you get to that ending part after the really big praise hymn. And it's just sort of like, oh, this deep breath of like, you know, I'm just now being able to take everything that just happened in. And so that was kind of really the whole idea. I mean, we had a lot of images. In fact, the spaceship analogy for some reason was really common for us on this record, and it was definitely true.
Yeah, for sure. Like, as I was listening to it, and it's interesting that you brought in the fact that there was an orchestra part of it, because I was so surprised at like the fullness, and like the way that I thought about it was like it's like a rock band, like, but it sounds like full, like an orchestra, and just kind of like the swelling of it and the choruses and stuff like that came out really well. So I'm interested in when you were planning on adding those orchestra pieces, what did the song sound like before that? Because the swelling of it adds so much to it, especially in the choruses. So was it just like more empty beforehand, or what was going on there?
That's the crazy thing, man. It wasn't. I mean, like, even now when we play it, like, we've been rehearsing the songs to play them live, and that was another thing too. We had a sort of I guess a rule that we had with this record was we had to be able to play the songs live. With the exception of, we can't always bring out with us, 6-string players. But I wish we could. That'd be awesome. Buy our record a lot and we'll be able to do it.
Don't stream it.
Yeah, don't stream it. Just buy it a ton. And so honestly, like, up until that point, like, we tracked this whole record, most of it live. So at the studio we were at, we tracked drums, bass, 2 guitars at the same time. And so I think that for that reason, it already had like this bigness to it, and bringing in the strings just added this whole new layer that actually made it almost more complicated for Brian and the mixing process, because there was already so much going on with all the other instrumentation. And I just think he did a really phenomenal job of not taking away from what the band was already doing, but just finding these really special parts to just add a little extra thing in there that just makes it special.
And honestly, to Brian's credit, like, I don't even know if I would have known that there was an orchestra back there. Like, it just fits so well. Like, it's not like, oh man, there's strings back there. It just kind of makes sense.
You listen through it and you could go through one pass and not even think about it. And I think it's just because that song, even as I was imagining it, definitely had a more orchestral vibe to it. And I think that's kind of, he does a really great job of arranging around something that, the band has already done and we all think is really, really special. So I thought, it was like that nice cherry on top of the ice cream sundae.
So that takes us to track 2, Madness, which I think was the first single off the record. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. So kind of talk, why did it end up track number 2, and kind of the thought process going into that song. And then I'll ask you about the bridge, because I thought the bridge was really great. But first, hit on kind of the writing process of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you listen to Crown Him in contrast to Madness, it's like going from like the top of a mountain into like you just dive down into like the worst like pit you could possibly go into. And that was intentional, because it's kind of like that in the Christian life, It's like you're just like, man, look at God. I just want to give him everything that I have, and worship him, and I can't help but do that. Like, when I think about all that he's done. And then you get to and then this next song, it's sort of like, well, here's the circumstance, and it's like completely altering my perspective right now. And that's just human. That's our human nature. And so that's kind of why that song was second. And so, really, I mean, it's just kind of about, everything. Like, when I brought it to the guys, musically, it was a little bit more chill than that. And then we kind of felt like, hey, we could add a few more things in there. There was that opening guitar part that I'm playing that I was playing on a different song, and then in rehearsal it was like, hey, we should try this part, and we did. And it's like, oh wow, it actually really works with the melody, because the melody, I intentionally wanted to sing it really flat, almost like not a whole lot of inflection in my voice, because I wanted it to feel like I was talking, like I was just like, mumbling it through, like it's just this prayer, this mumbly prayer to God. And so that's really kind of how this song kind of came together. And then when you get to the chorus, it opens up a little bit more. And it's not that it's like the realization of like, oh, it's all happy now. It's more like the tension between the angst of, oh my gosh, I just wish I could know more, God. Like, why does this have to happen? And then also the relief and knowing that, even though I can't possibly understand all this. So I want to keep searching. I want to know more. And I believe that in you, I can find something. I can continue to find the things that I actually need.
Yeah, for sure. And then I wanted to get to the bridge, because I remember I was like listening to it the first time, just kind of in the background, and it got to this, and I was like, this is a good song. And then it got to the bridge. Sometimes I wish I'd never been born to feel the sting of a merciless war. Like, I was like, whoa, that just got really dark really fast. So I see what you're talking about there, like just kind of the, like, oh man. But talk about the thought process of that bridge, because it gets really intense really quickly there.
Yeah, I mean, you should have heard some of the other things I wanted to say. But I mean, it was, in the end, like, this was exactly what I needed to say, you know? And I felt every bit of that lyric, you know? Like, I've felt that so many times throughout my life, if I were honest. Like, my dad died when I was 6. That, like, it was terrible. It was just so hard. It was tragic. It was a car accident. It wasn't like he has cancer, and I got to say goodbye to him. I woke up one morning, came down the steps, and there's 50 people in our house, like, sobbing because my dad was dead. And then, you know, it, like, messed with my mom real bad. You know, it messed up our family pretty good. And so there were lots of times, even as a young kid, I would just be like, God, I just want to go be with my dad. I just want to be in heaven. I don't want to be here anymore. And I've felt that a lot. And I felt that too, even when it was like, good grief, man. Like, here's my friend's daughter, like, you know, she's suffering. She's 7 years old, and she's just in the midst of, like, hell. And for me, it was like, man, I'm just feeling this. And then but then what kind of, you know, and the reason I did this intentionally is, like, while I did feel all that, there was a certain, like, peace to know, like, you know, even though I feel the pain of all that, like, God feels it too. And the reason that I can, like, say that is because he's given us something better. You know, like, one day I can put my hope in Jesus and know that I'm going somewhere better. And that was the thing for me that really, like, that's the turning point in that bridge. But also that was just the personal turning point that I had. It was like, all right, I'm just going to wait, and it's going to be hard, but I'm waiting for that day when I don't even ever have to feel this again, when my friend Ben's daughter never has to feel that again, when I never even have to think about death again, you know, because I'm, you know, in a place where there's, you know, eternal life, and the thought of death it won't even be on our minds. And so I think that to me was, like, really the process of going through that course. It's like, how do you say all that stuff in a few lines? And it took a long time to get to say it the way that I thought I should. And I'm really pleased with, well, I don't even know pleased. I'm really glad that it's saying it the way it does, because I feel every bit of that from beginning to end.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it reminds me of the Psalms, and just sometimes David's just like, God, where are you?
Yeah.
And by the end of it, he's like, you are awesome.
Yeah.
So just like this, like, whole range of emotions, which I think it's really healthy for Christian music. Like, man, like, sometimes it is frustrating, and sometimes you do just want to cry out to God and be like, I don't get what you're doing. Like, man, I'm frustrated, but at the end of the day, like, still, like, you are so good. Like, your ways are my ways, and, like, acknowledging that, I think is really good and is lost in a lot of Christian music. Anyways, love for you to play it, if you don't mind, acoustically, and allow the folks out there to hear it, if you don't mind.
Yes, I'd love to, man. Thanks.
Love it.
Shadows of doubt stealing my sleep. I'm wearing down without any relief. Tired eyes and a tangled up soul. I'm feeling lost, all alone. I keep on trying to soothe my grief, but all that's left is a borrowed belief. It's truth I need, not another cliche. Your word is my hope for a steady faith. Your mysteries are madness, yet still they keep me captive. The more that I discover, the more that I'm in wonder. Your way, your
thoughts are not my thoughts. I want to understand, but I cannot comprehend. I'm so lost. I'm so lost. This world's so cruel, down to its core. I'm drowning in doubt like never before. I thought with time the wounds would all heal, but still there's days when they're all that I feel. The more I live, the more that I see. The hurt I have isn't only on me. You can feel it too, you know what I need. An anchored rock in the wicked sea. Your mysteries are madness, yet still they keep me captive. The more that I discover, the more that I'm in wonder. Your ways are not my ways. Your thoughts are not my thoughts. I want to understand, but I cannot comprehend. I'm so lost. Sometimes I wish I never was born to feel the sting of a merciless world. The constant ache of all of this grief pressing me down, but it's never defeat. Cause when I've reached the end of my years, I live from the grave and I bury my tears. And I will see you face to face with brand new eyes in a finished face.
That was wonderful. I can tell you right now, that's so good. Madness, Citizens of the States. Let's keep going. Faith is the third track on this album. Zach, talk about that one and kind of the writing process there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that song, I think I shared with the band towards the end of that might have been the last song, last or second to last song we worked on for the record. And with that song, I was a little bit nervous to share it because the whole record at that point, we were kind of calling it like chill, and it kind of was. And so when we worked on that song, we had one other song on the record, which we'll talk about later, we knew like we wanted on the record. And so I felt like, hey, we need one more, because otherwise it's just going to make this one really big song feel like completely out of place. And so we worked on it, and it was just kind of cool. Like Brian had that like wild phaser keyboard part at the end, and Adam and I, the drummer, I kind of had this really specific part, and he took that part and kind of put his own touch on it. But really, I mean, we kept joking, especially once we threw the strings on that song, that it was like the next like song to be in like a James Bond movie or something like that. So, because it's all like, it's just kind of like this eerie thing, which I kind of like the how it's presented in that way, because it's talking about faith, which is it's a song of like confidence, like I'm believing all these things, but it's also kind of crazy. And so I think that's where why we kind of throw that bridge in there, and just why the song is sort of like more this minor kind of vibe, because it's like, it's not like it's all, everything's perfect, but it is in the sense that it's like, yeah, I believe all these things, but it's also kind of crazy to say that like I have confidence in this God that I cannot see. And so that's kind of how that one really came together, and this sort of really interesting kind of, I don't know, really rhythmic and upbeat song, but also has sort of an eerie sense to it.
Yeah. Your second album was pretty heavy on the synth, and this one is less heavy, which I'm okay with personally. But talk about trying to experiment with the synth, especially on the last album, but also with this one. Like, does the synth work with rock? Like, how do you feel like it works?
I think it can work. I just think that in a lot of times, like when you really like look at just like on our last record, even, I mean, Brian and I joke that sometimes that was just that record's the result of he and I just working on it by ourselves and just being in a room for like a month. And it's like, that's just, I think if we didn't really write it as a band. We were under a lot of pressure to write it pretty quickly. And so we just kind of, wrote what we wrote, and it came out the way it did. But I think that, I was really wanting on this record, and I think everyone else agreed, like we really wanted it to we just wanted it to feel a little bit more organic and raw. And so even like the synth sounds that we used on this record, which were pretty few, we tried to use something that was just like a natural sound that we could create within one of our own actual like keyboards, and not like a MIDI based thing.
This is the promise of my hope, that I am loved as one of his own. Receive it, believe in your know.
Number 4, I believe, which is Relent, which, is that the other one that came out early or no?
That one did come out early. That was the second song that we were... So technically we released Relent first. We just only released it through flexi discs, which are, if anyone's not familiar with those, are just an old school vinyl format. They're like, super small. You can only fit like 7 minutes, not even 7 minutes, like 6 minutes on each side. And so we sent those out to 500 people who signed up for them, and so that was the first. That was kind of our way of introducing the first song, and then we officially released it like digitally and through streaming and stuff a few months after, or like a couple weeks after Madness.
Gotcha, cool. So talk about this one. What was the thought process behind it, and where it kind of fit in the midst of the rest of the songs and the themes of the songs?
Yeah, I mean, I just felt super tired and exhausted. There was just a point where I was walking around my room, like thinking through the song and talking through the different, like thinking through all the different lyrics and ideas. And as I kept thinking through just what I was feeling, 2 stories in the Bible I was reminded of. One is the prodigal son, and just realizing that, oftentimes when we hear the prodigal son story, it's like we think of somebody else as the one who's like super reckless. But I was feeling that. I was feeling like the reckless one. Like I had all this like special treasure, yet I just wanted to like keep digging and looking all over the world for something better, and I wasn't finding that. And then the other one is just where Jesus says that, if you gain the world but lose your life, it's like, what good is that? There's no good found in that, because ultimately you build up this treasure, you build up this mountain of whatever accolades and different things you thought you needed, and you get to the end of your life and you realize doesn't get me anything. It didn't actually like feed my soul. And so that's kind of where I was at in both those. I was feeling both those things kind of simultaneously, and just feeling really tired and exhausted, and like I needed to just surrender and be okay with that.
Can I sit here at your feet? 'Cause this is right where I belong. Yeah, I can feel it in my soul. You see, I'm right where I belong. And I know that I belong. Yeah, I know that I belong. Yeah, I know that I belong. I know that I belong.
Next up, I'm guessing, is the other upbeat one that you were talking about. This is Day by Day, which is just a super fun track. Talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, this song in particular to me was like the one that really helped to crystallize the whole concept of the album for me. And so I really, this song is really special to me. And honestly, like musically, it's not super. It's not necessarily like super exciting, but I think when people listen to the song, they kind of get why, and that's just because lyrically, I mean, it's kind of like the lyric of this song. Probably, I mean, the lyrics in every song are like important and really, really important. And this one, I think, in a different way though, is just that it didn't need a bunch of other musical stuff to kind of support what I was trying to say. And so that's kind of why it flows the way it does. And, at face value, you might hear it and be like, okay. But then I think when you really listen to it, you kind of get what I'm saying. And that's just that there is sort of like an interesting thing about being changed every day and by God, and that it's kind of in the mundane, but also finding beauty in the simple, and in the just the sort of the things that are a little bit more unpredictable. And that's kind of where that song took us. And so we really just kind of wanted to make it feel like it just kind of cruises along. And that was definitely influenced by the lyric.
When I run like wildfire, I'm still a ransomed child, bought with blood spilled on a tree. Sin, death, they have no hold on me. My will is changing day by day. I'm not who I was. Now I am who I am, sinner saved, stumbling saint. Still never alone. He's alive in my bones, the ghost of God sanctifies. Day by day by day, day by day by day, day by day by day.
Talk about Kids. Kids is my favorite track on the album.
Oh man, thank you.
I don't know what it is about it, man, but I just really dig it. And I love the lyric that we are kids of grace. Like, there's not a lot of songs out there that say the word kids in there. So I think maybe it was just like the different thought of it, like makes it more relational rather than just saying like I don't know what I'm trying to say. But
yeah,
I liked it. So talk about like the thought process and why you chose the words that you did.
Well, not to put words in your mouth, but what I think maybe you might be saying, I don't know, is children. Children of God is like a much more, well, I mean, it's pretty much the only time, in the Bible at least, when you look at 1 John in particular, it's like, we are, even John like refers to us as little children, and or his readers, and I think that what we receive with God is more than what we often describe it to be, and that's, we talk about it as if it's sort of this business transaction. It's kind of, I don't know. I mean, like, I just imagine, I've never experienced adoption, so I don't know this, but, I would imagine, like, it's probably, like, gut-wrenching if you're adopted by a family that is terrible, but it's probably really special when you're adopted by somebody who loves you, like you're their own child, like they, birthed you and brought you into this world, and you're no different than any of their other kids. And that's really, to me, like, the beauty of God's relationship with us and him, is that we're more than just like this formal word child. We're like kids. And when you think of a kid, I think about my kid who's been screaming in the background of this entire interview, who's like 1 year old and just like rolling around making grunt sounds and wants to like do all kinds of stuff. And then I got my oldest 8-year-old daughter, she runs around and earlier was just kind of like losing her mind over the smallest thing, but then like later is like laughing and having a good time. It's just, I think that just shows like we're just kind of reckless like that. We remember some days and we forget more than most. And it's just that God loves us like that, though. He still loves us. Like, even though we're these kids that kind of just like wander off and want to do our own thing and don't want rules. We don't want to hear, like, we don't even, we don't care about all the, when we're in the midst of certain things, we're not thinking about the consequence and the way that might affect other people and different things like that. And yet God still loves us. He still wants us. He still, says that we have belonging in him. And so that's really where that song came from.
Even when we are so bad, no matter what we do to be good, his grace is greater than that. There's nothing better than to know we belong. We've been adopted by the Father of love. Our brother suffered on the cross in our place. We are kids of grace. We are kids of grace. We are kids of grace.
So good. Let's keep this ball rolling.
Totally.
Next is How Majestic. Correct me if I'm wrong. This one sounds like one of those songs where you get this really good lead line, like, because it's in the turn, like
Yep.
the lead line of the turn. I love it. And you're like, well, I guess we got to write a song to that lead line because it's a really nice lead line. So let's just figure out where it goes.
Is
that how it happened?
That is pretty insightful. So it started, the chorus, it actually started because a lot of times when we want to teach our kids like just different passages from the Bible, we'll write these songs, like we'll take a psalm, a verse or two, and I'll just write a little song to it for them to help them remember it. And this was one of those with Psalm 8 and How Majestic. And so the chorus started, but then I had that piano. It was actually on piano, that opening, dun, 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 dun. That part I played on piano. And I just loved it so much. I was like, we gotta use this as part of this song. And so that really helped to influence a lot of the way that song was written and kind of came together.
How majestic is your name in all the earth. Oh Lord, our Lord, how majestic your name in all the earth.
My joy is complete.
Yeah.
When I was listening to that song, it reminded me musically of the direction that Mumford went with their newest album.
Huh. That's interesting, yeah.
I don't know if that was... When I was listening, I was like, that kind of sounds like those newer tracks, because there's like kind of the little organ in the background and this driving track.
Totally.
And it reminded me of it. I am interested, like especially in this My Joy is Complete kind of, for me, sums up the album musically. Like, it has all the elements throughout the album that you're looking for, and that's kind of presented, but it's all in that one track. So talk about when did that song get written? Because my guess is that it might have been written towards the beginning of it, and it kind of the rest of it flowed out of that. But I also, again, I'm just guessing at this point.
Well, your guess is right. That is the first.
Gosh, I'm so good.
Dude, you're on fire here. This was NBA Jam. It'd be over. You'd be dunking
no doubt
from half court. Yeah, that song was written first, actually. And it kind of actually had a different vibe to it. Some of the guys in the band, it was a lot darker, and some of the guys in the band just felt like it was too dark. And so we decided to yeah, right. So we decided to kind of change it up a little bit. And that's really, I mean, part of it was just because like everybody would read the lyrics and they were feeling different things. For me, it was more like you can have joy even though there's a bunch of terrible stuff going on. And so, and for me, that terrible thing was coming out of Mars Hill. And my wife and I would get up every morning and read through the first 8 Psalms, just different pieces, maybe not all of them, but we were kind of in that for a while. And the theme that we saw was like, God is our peace, God is our refuge, God is our strength. And so that's really what influenced that song primarily. And so, rejoice when I'm singing it. Like, I mean, other people can interpret it differently, and I think that's really cool. But for me, it's not about happiness. It's about feeling okay, even in the midst of just like the claustrophobic effects of just fear and what I was personally feeling, and that was loss, in the midst of just kind of our church family just kind of falling apart in some ways.
All of this joy in my heart is greater than all that this world could provide. Rejoice and be glad in Him. Peace has come. Rejoice and be
the final song. You guys are really good. I don't know if you noticed about yourself. You guys are really good at the last song on the album being like a really good, just kick you right in the face at the end of it.
It's good to hear.
I don't know if that's intentional. Like, man, like on the first album, Oh God, like that to me, man, just such a good closer. And then when it gets towards the end of it and the keys come in with that dun 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 dun, that part. Oh my gosh, like, it's so good. And I know I sound like I'm just like blowing smoke.
That's great.
It's like, it blows me away every time I hear it.
I love that, man.
And this song, the last song on the album, Doubting Doubts, I think it's a similar in that way, where just like the last song, My Joy, like that one I feel like musically sums up, but then this Doubting Doubts like sums it up lyrically, the whole album.
Totally.
Really well. So talk about that one. Talk about it.
I mean, that song was the last song that was like completely written. I wrote that one. It's hard. It's difficult for me to remember it all, but I would say 90% of it was written, I feel like, in 30 minutes. And that's just because I knew what I wanted to say.
This is the best.
Yeah, and I just knew that, like, I want to say, these things. Like, I am realizing that, for me, I always saw Crown Him as the first song, and then as soon as I wrote this song, I just knew this is the last track on the record, and so did everybody else. And so, and I think that's because it really just kind of drives home the main idea of really what kind of sustains us through, no matter where you're at, whether things are great or things are hard, is that God loves us, and that He loves us no more when we believe and no less when we doubt. And so I just really felt like as I was writing this song, I just felt like I was, singing basically my prayer, that I, it was almost like one of those things where, and I love this about songwriting, sometimes, like meter and melody and rhyming and all that, you just forget about it.
Yeah.
And everything feels really natural. And it doesn't happen a lot, but in this song it did. And I just really love how it turned out, and I can't wait for people to hear it and listen to it a bunch.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons why I loved Kids so much, I think my love for it grew after hearing the Doubting Doubts, because of that line, like, I'm his kid.
Yeah.
No matter how I feel. Like, that to me, like, I was like, yeah. So I kind of love that song even more now. Just that reminder, like, it's not based off feelings like the rest of life seems to be.
Yep.
Which I think was a really good reminder.
Yeah, and that was definitely intentional, that lyric.
Yeah.
Just wanna shout it out through the world to hear it. That I'm his kid no matter what I'm feeling. I'm doubting doubts that just cannot help believing that I am loved no matter what. I am loved no matter what. I am loved no matter
So good. Well, man, that's the album. We talked about it all, which is an impressive feat in and of itself. But it is only 9 tracks. What kind of album has 9 tracks?
Dude, I know. It's my favorite albums are 9-track albums, so. I mean, the other reason we did it that way is because we wanted the whole record to fit on vinyl.
Okay.
On one vinyl disc. And so we wrote the record for vinyl. We said that, at the same time we said there's no requirements for length. So we let every song just be whatever length it was going to be. It wasn't like, all right, let's just cut this out. It was like, if it feels right, let's leave it. And we went completely with intuition and gut. And so, I kind of got my way in the end, and that was 9 songs, because some of them are like 6 minutes long.
Is the vinyl going to be like? Is it going to have that kind of smoky look of the cover pressed onto it?
That is the plan. I mean, it's kind of a challenging thing to do that, but that is the plan. It'll have a really cool vibe. It's a little different from the cover, but I actually kind of like the contrast. It's going to be really interesting. So.
Lovely. I can't wait to get my hands on that bad boy.
Nice, man.
And then finally, you're going on tour with Kings.
That's right.
Kaleidoscope.
That's right.
Are you doing full country or just West?
We're going to be doing West Coast, Midwest, Northeast, and then we're going to hopefully add some more dates. The plan is to definitely come to the Southeast and also down to the Southwest as well. And so we're basically, the fall will be West Coast, Midwest, and Northeast, and then come January, we're looking at adding some more stuff to it.
Great.
So.
The real question is King's going to say the F word? That's the real question people are asking.
Well, I don't know, man. You'll have to ask Chad that question, because...
Speaking of conversations I'm glad that people are having.
Yeah.
I'm thankful that's happening.
Yeah, I think it's been really cool. I mean...
It sucks for them, but it's great for everyone.
I mean, it's totally cool, though, because, I mean, at the end of the day, like, Chad knew what he was doing, and he wasn't trying to, like, pull a fast one on people.
I don't even know how he goes on Facebook anymore. Like, when it first came out, I made the mistake of reading the comments of
Oh
Facebook,
my gosh.
and it was just like the worst.
I know, man. I definitely had to come to his defense on a couple of them. I couldn't help myself just because of how ruthless people were being. But, it is cool. I think it's meant... I mean, that song, so far to date is, of this record is the most streamed song on that record. I think by 3 times any other song. So I mean, it obviously, some people are listening to it because they're like, initially we're like, what in the world, a Christian band that says, drops the F-bomb in a song. But now I think people listen, the majority of those plays are just the result of people who it really speaks to them, and it's meaningful to them. So.
Well, luckily he put it on a track, like a really BA song. Like, it's a super good song. So
Yeah,
I think they're hearing a really great track.
It's cool, man.
If they're just searching out for that.
Yeah, I love it. It's cool.
Well, how can people find the tour, but also find your new album?
Yeah, so go to livelovetour.com for all the dates and details. You'll find everything you need there. And then as far as the new record, I mean, yeah, go to our website, citizensandsaints.com. You can click on the store button, and you can right now you can purchase vinyl, you can purchase CDs. We've got some new merch up there, and all that stuff goes to just help support what we do. And for us, like, if we could make money and live off of selling records, we would, but it's just not the world we live in. So for us, like, every album that is sold is it gives us more money for the future to be able to keep doing what we do and making records. Like, that's all we use that money for, is just to make another record. So if you like what we do, buy the record, and hopefully we can keep doing this for a long time. So
last question about the tour: is the tour gonna primarily be in bars, or are they primarily gonna be in churches?
It'll be a little bit of both. Every run has probably, like the West Coast one, it's 4 clubs and 2 churches. Midwest, I think, is 2 churches and 3 or 4 clubs, and the East Coast will be mostly clubs and a couple churches here and there. So we're actually trying to move away from, unless it makes sense, like, we really just want to start doing clubs more, and that's for a number of reasons. One, we just like the idea of being in a more neutral location and stuff, and the churches that we've played with have been phenomenal, really, really amazing people, and I suspect we'll continue to do stuff with some of them, but overall, we like the idea of being able to go to a neutral spot.
Yeah, for sure. Wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Zach. Appreciate
Thank
you
you
coming on, my friend.
Totally, man. Take care. Thank you so much.
Big thanks to Zach from Citizens and Saints for joining us and talking track by track through the new album, A Mirror Dimly, that is out today. I cannot say enough good things about that album, so go buy it, get it, and support them. Super great guys, so please go buy it. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new episode. We're back to our regularly scheduled releasing bi-weekly on Mondays, so the 26th. We'll be putting out an interview with a really good band. So subscribe, please subscribe, review. We're trying to get to 20 reviews by that date. And if we do, Dave and I will both release really bad songs we wrote as kids. So do that. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. And go buy the album. Bye.
Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive's Employee of the Month, 2 months in a row. Leave a message at the... Hi, Jamie. It's me, Jamie. I just had a new idea for our song about the Name Your Price tool. So when it's like, tell us what you want to pay, hey, 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 and the trombone goes, blah, 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 and you say, we'll help you find coverage options to fit your budget. Then we just all do finger snaps while a choir goes, savings coming at ya, savings coming at ya. Yes? No? Maybe? Anyway, see you at practice tonight. I got new lyrics for the rap break.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.